One Piece as a card game has a very strange dilemma from what I've seen. If you pay attention to any other card game, look at Vanguard or Dragon Ball or even Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything like that, you will realize that as soon as a set 1 comes out for any format, regardless whether it's Overdress or V-Series or even original Vanguard, even original Dragon Ball or set 1 Yu-Gi-Oh! Or even Pokemon, although Pokemon has another weird dilemma because it didn't really have much of a competitive scene, so the projected best deck was kind of a red herring, and we didn't actually know the best deck until a seasoned player later played a completely different deck into it, realizing later that Lickitung was actually surprisingly better than Haymaker. Regardless of whether or not we actually think that a format is solved, chances are, if you are playing the first set of a brand new card game, within the first month, people will come to conclusions that a certain deck is the best deck. Be it in Vanguard, where OTT was suddenly the best deck for quite a while, even through the third set of the game. Or D-Series, where Bastion was immediately basically tier 0. Pokemon, regardless of whether or not it was true or not, Haymaker was the most represented deck.
One Piece
has one of the most interesting dilemmas I've seen in a card game, where the mechanics parallel existing card games like Dragon Ball Super and Magic. Another really interesting thing I have found in One Piece is that every region you play the game in, a different person will have a different answer to what the best deck is. There are regions that will say it's blue. Most of East Coast United States will say it is green. They will say that Kid is just too good, and it just feels too bad playing against Kid, so you might as well just play it. Other areas, like West Coast United States, swears by Mono Red Luffy, the Midwest, or Australia, that are very sold on Kaido and Law. There is no definitive best deck in the format, in my opinion. However, the closest thing I have found is a deck that me and a very small group have been testing for quite a while. One Piece is probably the first game I have ever played where, upon going into a set 1 format, into the end of a set 1 format, we still have no idea what the actual best deck is, and if there is one, it's by such a tiny margin that it almost doesn't matter. What I'm saying is you can basically take one of about 5 to 6 One Piece decks into a tournament, and someone in the room will think that you're playing the best deck. The only real thing we've learned this season for One Piece into the set 1 format is that the best deck is not Zoro. Other than that, we have a completely different answer based on region, and it even goes into the representation of the decks. We see not a lot of mono reds participating in Cali, but a lot of them convert into top 16. We see a tremendous amount of Kids being represented in East Coast, and almost all of them get into top 8. We see an average amount of Kaido, and a very small amount of Kaido convert because it's a very high-rolly deck. We see a very small amount of Dofi, and a very small amount of Dofi converting into tops, because again, it's a very niche deck that not many people are actually going to be playing well. All of this uncertainty, I honestly think, boils down to nobody really knowing how to play the game still. We are about 3 to 4 months into playing One Piece in person, in real life, TCG, and I still don't think many people know how to play the game correctly. This is just my insight, and I think the more insight into this game we get, the more definitive answers we will have into what is objective and subjective in this game. Look at this guy. Look at, oh my god, there's 2! Are you guys subscribed to Team Best Girl? Alright, bye. I don't know why I thought to record a deck profile here, but this is a pretty sick backdrop, not gonna lie. So I'm gonna go over what I think was the best deck of set 1, which is Law. This deck loses to 2 things primarily, which are Kaido on high roll and Luffy if it also gets a defensive jet pistol. Besides that, everything is pretty damn easy. Even through the film deck that came out, you have like built-in countermeasures to a lot of their stuff. This is a list that Noman, Nikki Goldman from Strictly Broken, and I have been kind of hiding because they were taking it to Treasure Cup, but they ended up just not going. One of the harder matchups was Mono Red Luffy. If you know Bryant from Cali that won the Cali Treasure Cup, he was on that deck before a lot of people were. So yeah, in general, this deck is just very strong overall. You have countermeasures to everything. If you think Kid is a bad matchup, you are not playing Law correctly. You just completely shit on Kid, which is supposedly the best deck in the format. Kid is honestly, like, you just murder Kid. Kaido isn't the worst thing in the world. You do have a lot of tough games against it, but they're not unwinnable. We're gonna go over the Law list I played this season, and I guess what we're going into set 2 with also. So usually with the Law list, you have 19 to 21 drops. I'll go over these right now. You have your 4 Namis, you have your 4 Otamas, you have your 4 Choppers, your 4 Bonnies, and I do play 4 Beige. I know a lot of people only play 3 of this. I think it's a 4 of. Into something like Kaido, yes, like 1-drop blockers don't matter too much because they can pop them with King and Who's Who. But realistically, you're only out to their snowball plays with their just big beat sticks like 10-drop Kaido that you're eventually just going to be put on a clock to anyways, is just having a follow-up to drop down on the field. Usually you're dropping like 1 or 2 blockers down, they kill them, and then if you don't have a follow-up, you're kind of screwed. Basically, if you don't have that extra blocker afterwards, they're just going to run over you. So making sure you have extras is really important. And then on top of these 21 drops, I also play another 4 1-drops, which are these Namis. This card is so slept on, it's insane. First off, yes, it's another weenie you can put on the field. Your goal in most games is just to get the 5 out as fast as possible, and the extra 1-drops are just a way of getting there. If you look at why Mono Red Luffy started getting played over Zoro, going down to the bare basics of it, it's mostly because Mono Red Luffy essentially has 1 to 2 more Dawn than Zoro will at every stage of the game. Being that you can move rested Dawn around as opposed to dedicating a standing Dawn somewhere every turn. Zoro has 9 Dawn per turn, whereas Luffy has 11. And while you're spending so much Dawn to just refill your field up, using those to convert into either aggression or just to enable your Dawn effects or just to hit magic numbers is crucial. Not only that, like, yes, this card is not searchable, so we are playing 4 so we can make sure we can open any amount of it. It's not the end of the world if we don't open it, but opening it is definitely very good. Also, if we're spending like 2 standing Dawn to swing early into Kaido somehow, what we'll usually do instead is we'll be able to play a card and then give a standing Dawn and then give a rested Dawn and still be able to commit things to the field, meaning that they have to spend extra Dawn to pop things early, and we're also just getting in extra pressure. Like, this card is just really solid. Going into the future, yeah, we're going to be playing a film list, so some of the cards might change, but as of right now, this card is incredibly good, and I think 4 of it is kind of mandatory. We have 4 Brook. Why 4 Brook over the other 2K counters? Brook is just incredibly solid. So, like, the deal with Brook, okay, is that when you are searching for Straw Hats, right, like, yeah, he's searchable, so, but, like, why not play the promo Luffy, right? Because he's a searchable Straw Hat with 2K counter, too. This guy's 2 drop to the field. You basically refund the Dawn by putting it on a character, and then you can bounce it back to the hand, so you essentially spent 4 Dawn for a play that would have usually cost you 5 Dawn, and you also basically refunded it by 2. So you basically spent 2 Dawn to power up a guy and then resolve Law's effect. So basically completely neutral, and it's also kind of reusable. This card just comes back to your hand and then you can Dawn it again later, and like basically you're just hitting really good magic numbers with it. 4 of it is pretty mandatory in a set 1 format, but going into the future you could probably play less of it for other cards. I play 2 of the Killer Blocker. This is pretty standard. One of the flex spots I'll talk about later. There is a single flex spot in this deck that Nikki, Noman, and I all play a different card in place of it. I'm actually in favor of a third of this, just because, again, my mentality with having the follow-up blockers is really important. Being that if somebody clears your blockers, you want to make sure you have extra. So yeah. The draw comes up sometimes, more so just having a blocker that's 2k or 2-drop is really good. The draw does come up into Kaido sometimes if they don't get their removal out early enough. You can just remove these yourself to dig for aggressive pieces. If it wasn't for Kaido, this would actually be Shachi, because Shachi is a 2-drop, I believe it's either a 3 or 4k power, but the reason that matters is because if they're going in and they're swinging at your Bonnies rested with a 2k, you can rest the Shachi, block it, and then Shachi sticks on the field. So so that you can either use it later or they have to redirect another swing, basically going 2 for 1 as a blocker. Shachi is really solid. The only issue with it is it's not a supernova, so it's not searchable, but again, that doesn't matter too much because we're only playing 2 of this. If you want to play Killer or Shachi is entirely down to you, though. You don't play Penguin, you just play Shachi for the numbers, by the way. Either one does come up, but I am a fan of Killer just for the utility of drawing. For Neko, so when people started off, they saw topping list play 4, and they're like, 4 is too many, so they went down to 3. And they're like, wow, this card is dead, so they went down to 2. And then they started playing better players, so they went back to 3. And then they went back up to 4. And again, just the more like good decks you play, and the more matchups that actually scare you you face, namely the mirror, Neko will always come up. So, like, into the mirror, this is basically your win con. You need to make sure you open as many of this as possible, because they'll usually either hold their Bonnies, or they'll hold their Namis so that they can keep them on the field. So you just swing into them, and you just get the curve really quickly. That's pretty important. It's not searchable by anything. The one flex spot could be a Momo, but I'm not a fan of Momo, just because when you're going top 5 with Momo, and you're getting a Wano card, if you even hit a Wano card, you have so little of them in this deck. Chances are you're putting all your good Straw Hat targets to the bottom, which is like not that big of a deal, right? You know, Pot of Desires mentality. But like at the same time, you have so many things that just check top 5 for like better targets that you're kind of missing out on them. And you're playing a 1-drop that does that. So you might as well just be playing better utility cards in that one spot. The one flex spot, I'm playing Nico Robin. I don't think this card is very good, especially in this deck. Dedicating a Dawn to something every turn is okay in certain formats where they put a lot of weenies on the field. It's okay in the mirror. This will sometimes win you mirrors, but on the other hand, this card is basically just jet pistol fodder. You put this on the field and you basically tell your opponent, if you have a jet pistol in your hand, you need to shotgun it on this card, or else you're not going to get a better target later. So like, yeah, obviously like you want to be making them waste their jet pistols on this ideally, but realistically speaking, it's still a pretty good target for them to jet pistol. I'm just not a fan of turn 2 playing a single card down that doesn't do anything and immediately leaves the field the next turn, which is why I'm not playing 4 of this. Usually when you're playing Law, if you're playing Nico Robin, you put this on the field turn 2. You spent your entire turn paying 3 Dawn, get this on the field, and you probably like swing for 5k with your leader, which is like easy block or easy take, whatever. And then this card sits there, and then your opponent will use one of their 8 million removal tools to get rid of it. And then what just happened? You spent 3 Dawn to play a card that just left the field. Your opponent answered it, and you didn't get anywhere closer to getting your advantage with Law. Whereas what you do instead is you play your million 1-drops, like your Namis that you're playing extra copies of. You just fill your field up. Your opponent doesn't really know like entirely what to hit. So chances are they'll either aggro you just to make sure they get your 4 life down as fast as possible, which again kind of plays into your strategy. You eat as much life as possible early game, and then you're basically getting such a big board state later on that your opponent literally just can't swing at your life, or else you just snowball advantage on them. So at that point, like, you get the board state, they can't swing at your life, they have to redirect their shit at like all of your tiny attackers to the point where they just can't out advantage you. Whereas if you play the Robin early, they're redirecting that, and it's basically in a way that they get a little bit more advantage, so I'm not too much of a fan of it. Again, the only reason I play this one card is in the mirror to redirect the jet pistols and the Nekos and all of those, just to make sure that they don't get as much value out of them as they would like to on something like Law or Luffy. Another thing, if you realize, with a lot of people playing 4 of this and a lot of Otamas and a lot of Wano cards in the topping lists, like in the Australia list plays a lot of Wano cards and whatever, what you'll realize is that those are good players, but not a lot of good people are good at One Piece just yet. And this format is very unsolved, even after set 1 has finished its format and we're going into set 2. Not a lot of people really know what they're talking about in One Piece, or like what they're even playing. Because like, you have stuff like Dofi and Kaido and Zoro and Luffy. Like, there's so many quote-unquote best decks in the format, but there's not really a best deck in the format. And realistically, whatever deck you play, as long as you can capitalize on how people are expected to play, you're probably going to win whatever you play and just snowball everybody. It halfway boils down to, like, most One Piece players aren't that good right now, and also just that, like, the few things you can do to answer the better One Piece players are, like, really easy to accomplish. So yeah, this does not have to be Nami. This flex spot, for me, used to be a 3rd killer. For Noman, used to be another jet pistol, as you'll see we play less. And for Nikki, used to be a 3rd copy of one of the other trial deck 5-drop laws. I'm doing Robin again just for the mirror, assuming that both of us come to the conclusion that this is the best deck. Maybe this comes up, maybe it doesn't. It came up for me, plenty of locals, so yeah. One of the best cards in our deck is Zoro. Part of the merit of red-green is that you have green that is a very telegraphed color. The way you beat green is by making sure you can count how many attacks they get max, counting the kid as well, and just making sure that you can deal with each turn in the future. But when you splash red into that with the unpredictable nature of just randomly having a jump scare 5k come out, sometimes it gets a little scary. Sometimes, with this deck, because we play Nami, those are untelegraphed 6k swings, which actually do matter, because if they are resting their Law just flat out as a blocker as a 6k, you can just randomly dawn it, swing at it, and then just deal with it when they don't have any cards in their hand, and you're just chilling. Same thing with Luffy. If they play the Luffy and they shotgun it and swing at something, you can just plop this down, make it a 6k. Chances are they don't really have much of a hand if they're like going all out and using that Luffy that exact turn. So you swing at them at their Luffy and you just clear their board with like one card. See lists play like 2 of this, and that's like objectively wrong. I saw the list that 1 played 2 of it. I have no idea what he was thinking. You need this for Kaido. You need this for like the decks that kind of get advantage on you later. You're going to need this for Ivankov in the next format. Basically, get your 4 Zoros as fast as possible. It is a Supernova and a Straw Hat, so both targets search it. It's basically, you're going to see it every single game, and you need to make sure you have as many as possible. You usually want, ideally, like 2 of them per game, but like 1 of them is enough sometimes. Having 4 is just like mandatory. I do only play 3 Jet Pistol. This can be a 4th Jet Pistol where the Robin was. But I honestly only think you need 3. 4 is very good. Yes, we do like playing 4 heal triggers in our deck. Defensively, damaging these is very good because you can randomly just win games you shouldn't be winning. But realistically, that only comes up into the mirror because you can basically clear every other matchup for free. Outside of the one thing you would want the 4th is into green if they snowball on you with the 8-drop kid, and they specifically have 2 of them. You can deal with a single 8-drop kid perfectly fine if you get to either Luffy or Otama fast enough. Where you need the 4th of this is if they get a first one and they play it, and you swing into it or you kill it, and then they play a second, you will sometimes need the extra Jet Pistol, which is unfortunate. It will come up sometimes, especially if a lot of people are solved on Kid being a better deck in the format. So this was a 4th Jet Pistol in certain events I played, but again, as people realized that Kid wasn't as good as it was like propped up to be, this left the deck as a 4 of and is perfectly fine at 3. 6-drop blockers are a pretty big deal. Like answering your opponent's laws is a pretty big deal. Hitting Uta in purple is really good. The new blocker from the movie deck. You do want like a minimum of 3 of it. We are playing 4 Law because this card is mandatory. This is one of our best ways of just snowballing advantage as quickly as possible. You can very easily turn like 2 cards into 4 with just this card. And then over the time span of 2 turns, turn that 4 into like 7. Very easy for your opponent to play into this card. And even if they don't play into it, you're still getting a lot of advantage back from it. This card also makes it so that you don't need the 5 dudes on field. A lot of time into Kaido, what the other lists would have to do is they would have to compromise just not being able to resolve Law's effect as the leader, and just play with a vanilla 4 life leader, which kind of sucks. Whereas with this deck, you have just as many more 1-drops as is able to commit to the field and just get the 1 resolution of Law off so that you can just get a little bit more advantage. So you can dig for the pieces that are actually like killing your opponent. Again, this card is just easier to resolve in that matchup in my list particularly. You do always want 4 of this. Like regardless how bad your Law list is, you should always be playing 4 of this. Playing 2 Luffy, this can go to 3. This is very important into green if they'd put out the 8-drop kid, but again, it's not always that important. This just answers a lot of things. This is one of our finishers. You don't always need it, but when you do draw it, it's the bomb that wins you the game. And then finally, just to complement it, we are playing 2 of the trial deck Law. Again, I mentioned Nicky Goldman does play a 3rd of this, but I'm fine with 2, honestly. This card doesn't come up in my games as much as his games, but this card does come up quite a bit. Whether you use it defensively just to stand your things that you swung with early, like Luffy, or if you swing with Law and then you use this to stand it, and then you go next turn, you bounce this back, play a red, like Luffy, and then the turn after, you play this back again, and then stand the Luffy you swung with. It just comes up. It's a really good utility card. It's probably your best finisher in the deck, and like you never want less than 2 of this, to be honest. The more Law you play, the better this card gets. I actually played this when I only had 2 trial decks put together, and this card was just winning me games, and then I took it out for the quote-unquote better Law list that everybody was playing without this card, and I'm like, wow, this deck is really missing something. And what the deck was missing was just a concise Straw Hat engine and 2 really solid finishers in this Law. You realize with my list, what you'll realize is that this is like, I don't play a Wano engine outside of Neko. I don't play any funny like 7-8 drop kids. This is just a really concise Straw Hat deck. This deck does like 3 things every single game. It does them better than your opponent, and it will do them every single game, and you will just win off of them, and there's no reason to do anything else. You might feel like you need Kid or the Wano package in a certain matchup, but let's be honest, you really don't. Yeah, you face a lot of mono red Luffy, you might want the green engine. Chances are you actually don't, and you just need to play a bit differently. Going into the future, I think the movie deck cards are very good. We will probably play them going forward. A lot of them just play each other for free, which I'm a fan of. We do need to make sure we have like each of the 2-card combo together more often than we have other 2-card combos in this game, like the Penguin Chachi combo, just so we're getting more value out of it. But looking forward, that's kind of something to worry about next format when I end up playing Law in the future. I'm kind of looking at like Whitebeard and Kinemon, to be honest. I didn't want to upload this deck any earlier just because I wanted to make sure that everybody I was playing this deck with had a fair shot at Treasure Cup. But since a bunch of things came up, I might as well just post this deck now. I've been just mollywopping everybody at as many locals as possible with it, and I think going forward, before set 2, you can go ahead and enjoy your couple locals you have this deck playable at for now. But yeah, this has been Team Best Girl. See you guys later.